Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod with Abe Dearmer, aka the Dreamer. Abe is CEO at Appsembler. He's done a bunch of companies. He's also been in the army for 16 years. Rugby, that is player. You'll see by his shape, Abe is gigantic. He's into leadership, marketing, sales, and SaaS and operations. So we're gonna talk about SaaS today, military stuff, defense industry as well. Abe is in Australia. I am in Oaxaca, Mexico. This pod is presented to you by podpire.com. If you want to start your own podcast, you can go to podpire.com. We help you monetize the unconventional way. Abe, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and about Appsembler.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Thanks for that introduction. I'm definitely not the biggest bloke when you put me on a rugby field. I can guarantee you that. But it's always nice for the ego. So I'm Abe. I'm based out of Australia. So I'm about 2.5 hours from Sydney in a fairly rural town in New South Wales, which is just a lifestyle for me. And as you said, Charles, I spent a lot of time in the full time in the Army, the Australian Army, and then made the transition into SaaS, and particularly starting at private equity firm called Xenon Ventures that's in the SaaS space, and worked on a company called Integrate.io as the director of operations, which was the steep learning curve out of Army and into the SaaS world. And then went through 2 acquisitions. The first one was 5CRM, which is a CRM built for telemarketing, and then Teamgate CRM as well, which is a CRM, which is really a competitor of your Pipedrive and your HubSpots. So that ease of use, quick to set up CRM for sales. And then now I'm working on Appsembler, which is a really cool product as far as what it enables people to do is get that hands-on learning. And we've got some great customers like Cockroach Labs, Snowflake, who really immerse themselves in Appsembler. So we've got 2 lines. One is the LMS, which is built on top of OpenEdX, which a lot of people will be familiar with. And the second line is our virtual labs, which allows people to get their product in the hands of customers, in the hands of prospects, much faster without having to worry about pesky installs or anything like that to get that hands-on learning.
Talk about the Army first. I'm a student of various battles. I think business is war. Obviously, you don't try ever to start a useless war to create useless casualty, but I love the energy of it, the strategy of it, the execution of the strategy, the discipline. So, what have you learned about being in the Army, and what do you study? What battles do you study nowadays?
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting question. And when I look at my experience from being in the Army, realistically, you learn that things are not that bad. There's always someone doing it worse than you are. I think about days that are hard when you're working in business, and I think to myself, these are the easiest days compared to things that I've had to deal with in the past. So it really just allows you to bring that perspective into things that, hey, it's actually not so bad. There's people that are probably sitting in a trench right now getting shot at, which is more significant than the business situation that you're dealing with. So it allows you to put things in perspective. The other part is resilience and leadership that I think really comes with it as well. And leadership is a really key component of being able to get people motivated to work towards a common objective. And one of the hardest parts that we have in business is how do we set the strategy, get people to follow the strategy and conduct their tasks to achieve that end state that we want to get to. And that's really what being in the Army is all about, motivating a team through hard circumstances. And then that second part of the question about what battles do I study, I'm a real sucker for the World War One, World War Two, specifically looking at, around Europe. But there's a really good podcast by Dan Carlin, which is amazing series. It's like 8 hours, and there's 6 8-hour parts to it where he goes through the start to finish for each of the world wars. And for me, that's really amazing. And a lot of the books that are over there are based upon World War One and World War Two battles that have been fought.
So I started this series on Netflix studying Alexander the Great, which arguably is the greatest conqueror of all time. Not saying that what he did was good for humanity, but yeah, definitely covered lots of territories and had people follow its ways for goods and bads. His first battle was such an interesting one because it was literally his first battle. He had to prove himself to his army, to his generals. And he was like, okay, let's start the battle now. Let's not wait for the next day. So there was a surprise element in there. And then he was facing Greeks mercenaries, so like pretty much people of his own that the Persian Empire had bribed. And the interesting thing there is that there were much less warriors on his side, but he caused panic in the ranks, and everyone started running their own direction. And it's made me think of how susceptible as humans we are, the horse panic, but the humans too, and if like, let's say that we're a group of 10 and 6 of us start panicking, even like 2, like everyone will spread the panic and we might just break rank and we might lose the battle. And it's always interesting that element of surprise and how humans are susceptible to fear. I think I've learned to face most of my fears through endurance sports and to just imposing massive pain on my body. How have you dealt with pain on your side, and how does that reflect in your business in the tough and challenging moments?
Yeah, I think when you talk about surprise, it's really an interesting factor where you can achieve significantly better outcomes through surprise. And another person, and similar to your statement about Alexander the Great, not saying what they did was was good or anything like that, endorsing them, but Genghis Khan, big fanboy as far as how he went through and created the biggest empire that's ever been known to man. And his whole thing was based around surprise, is because they were on horseback, everyone had horses. They would literally go in, take over a town, and before the message, or as the message was arriving to the next town that they were going to, they were already there. And so they had no time to prepare, caught them completely by surprise, and that's how they were able to achieve what they did. But when you talk about, resilience, facing fears, putting that into business, I think the biggest thing, so Andrew Huberman has started talking about the mid-singular cortex in the brain, which essentially gets bigger by putting yourself through activities that you don't want to do. And resilience and pain, no one really wants to do it, but as you said, you put yourself through those trials because you think you come out better on the other side. And so through all those years of doing things that you may not necessarily want to do but have to do, you build that mid-singular cortex, which then allows you to focus more and get things done that may not be as satisfying. Like, you may not want to make a tough call. You may not want to have a tough conversation with an employee. You may not want to venture down a path where you're testing things that may have, a detrimental outcome to the business. But at the end of the day, it needs to be done, and you have the willpower and determination to go and do that. And I think that's really the biggest thing, is that often people will go towards the path that looks like it has the least resistance, but realistically, that's the wrong path to go down, and everyone knows it. But the problem is that they take the easy path, not necessarily the right path.
How can you apply blitzkrieg to business? How can you disrupt a market extremely quickly before competition even realize what's happening?
Yeah, that is a really, really interesting component there. And we look at some elements of guerrilla marketing, or just essentially getting into the market and seeing where it can take you. One of the I guess one of the big elements that we need to look at is, when we talk about that, we look at Snowflake as a business, and how they've grown over time has been absolutely phenomenal. And they essentially brought in Frank Slootman, who was, he's a prolific, results-driven CEO that worked in a number of different organizations and achieved amazing results. And he was like, I'm retired. I'm done. I've had enough. If you read his book, it's an amazing book. And he essentially goes through and says, look, I'll come on board to Snowflake as long as I can bring 2 other people with me on the journey. And so he goes through that, and then he walks into Snowflake and says, and just finds what's fundamentally wrong. And I wouldn't say it's a particular singular action that achieves surprise in the competition. It's more of a continued or a holistic approach to the organization. And his biggest thing was what he learned throughout time. And he learned this particularly at his time at ServiceNow, was he spent too long deliberating over whether someone should be employed or whether the department has a particular function that's worthwhile. And now what he says is, if someone can't describe what someone does quickly and in 100 words or less, they're really not worth having around. And what we find is that there's a lot of organizations that have people who are not really performing a particular function. And when you look at things like Genghis Khan, where their army actually fell over was they went away from having people on horseback, because once they started to, I guess, take in all these other armies, it slowed them down significantly. And that's where they actually started feeling their losses. And so you compare that to business, is that you start with this really lean, fast moving organization that's able to make changes rapidly. As you grow, you think you need more people and you add people on, but all they end up doing is adding governance, which is important, but adding extra layers of governance, adding extra layers of bureaucracy that stop you from achieving what you were able to achieve before with that fast pace, quick moving as an organization. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily achieving surprise. It's just about being able to adapt and move quicker when the market changes than your competition. So you see giants that just don't adapt and change, and then they die.
I would add to that that horses are technology, just like languages, just like money is. We often don't see that this way, but horses, they were technology. And I can just imagine Genghis running through a camp, pure chaos with the noise of the horse and the horror it must have created. So that's really disruptive, and it's not something other people were doing. And I guess it's also about taking risks, right? Because at first this idea was probably judged completely stupid, like, look, we're gonna run with the horses and they're gonna just shoot us down, but it was really disruptive. And yeah, Frank Slutzman's a total beast. Like his book Raising Expectations, Increasing Urgency, Elevating Intensity. I'm not sure if I would have ever worked for that guy. I mean, I'm an intense guy, but like having a guy like that on my back, but certainly created a unicorn supremely fast. Snowflake is such a fast growing company. They recently IPO'd. It's really impressive. I want to ask about Xenon partners. How did they first recruited you? Like, did they just see like, oh, this army guy, huge discipline, he's just gonna execute? What did they see in you?
Yeah, it's a really funny story how there's a number of ex-military people that are involved in Xenon at the moment, and it's quite funny how it all came about. So one of the partners, James Crennan, he went and he completed his MBA at INSEAD with the founder, Jonathan Siegel. And James went back and went to go into investment banking and said, I don't really like this. And Jonathan said, hey, why don't you come and work for me on one of our companies, which was Dream Factory, which is still in the fund. And anyone who wants APIs generated instantly, Dream Factory is the company for that. They're amazing. And so James started there. And then it sort of just came to light that people out of the military have this really laser-like focus, the ability to adapt quickly, disciplined, work hard, and are resilient. And so it's almost the perfect fit for how Xenon likes to operate. We like to operate lean. We like to make sure that we're adaptable, ready to change, fast-paced. And so for us, running lean is important. So understanding how to motivate people across different job roles to achieve that end state is really important. So from there, a few more ex-army people came on board, and Xenon. I knew James from my time in the army, and a few other people at Xenon from my time at the army, and then we went across, and I've spent 2 weeks working in Xenon to see what it's like. And then after that point, I was hooked. Loved everything about it, the fast pace, everything about the software industry and where we're heading. So I came along for the ride, and it's been 3.5 years, I think, actually probably coming up 4. So that's, yeah, it was a really exciting time.
And why did you leave the army? Like, must have been a pretty drastic shift.
Yeah, you get to a certain point in the army, Charles, where you move away from doing the jobs which are on the the front line with soldiers, and you end up in a position where you're going to be behind a desk for a period of time. And for me, that wasn't really what I was looking for in the army in those job roles. So for me, I still love the army, still love everything about it. My time there's no regrets or anything like that. It was a great place and a great growth opportunity for everything, leadership, resilience, everything that comes with it. However, there's just times where you have to consider other parts, like family, stability, not moving around every 2 years. And if you're going to be stuck behind a desk, might as well do something that could potentially be a bit more interesting as well.
But you still have rugby. You still have your brothers there. So how do you take the lessons on the field, off field?
Yeah, that's, rugby, I play with the local team. We've won the competition 2 years in a row now. So it's been a pretty successful 2 years with them. The biggest thing about taking the learning from them is just about how to foster that team, and having each other's back is like a really big part of that as well. Being able to support each other as we, off the field and on the field is a big part, and just a community that's bred with that. I really don't think you can replicate the relationships that are built in that physical, intense environment anywhere else. It, creates a certain sort of bond where that the person to the right's got to do their job, the person to the left is going to do their job. You need to focus on yours, and it builds that sense of trust. And for me, that's the biggest part about business when you translate that across is you need to look to your left and right and know that someone else is going to be doing their job. And as a leader in a business, if I have a feeling of, oh no, I have to meet with this person for our weekly meeting, or hey, can I trust this person to do their job? That's where I've learned over the years that you probably need to get rid of that person, because if you can't trust them to be doing that job, and you look to your left and right and think, do I need to, have a really close eye on this person because I'm concerned whether they're going to be doing what they need to do? That's a key indicator that, hey, you need to make that decision now. And Frank Sleepman talks about it, where he's fire fast, highest low is his mentality. Is if you get an inkling that someone's not doing their job, or is not going to be trustworthy, you need to act early.
At Appsembler, seems that you made about 7 mil last year. How can you take that to 10 this year?
Yeah, for us, Charles, it's a really big focus on looking at the Open edX community and seeing how we can leverage that community and getting more involved in the community. And what we see is there's lots of opportunities, especially around the government sector. So for us, it's just about executing the little things. It's about doing conversion rate optimization on the website. It's about testing out different marketing channels and ICPs as we move forward. And it's also about being a good custodian in the Open edX community. So there's some great people, Ed and Eden in the Open edX community. Ed's the VP engineering. Eden is the partnerships manager, and they just provide a really great opportunity to get involved in the community. And for me, that is a really key part. Is there's some tough competition between Open edX, Canvas, Moodle for those big university and bigger deployments. And for me, I just keep hearing how terrible Canvas is in the universities, yet they keep buying it. It's like how salespeople keep buying Salesforce, although they know it sucks. It's like a rite of passage to feel like you're, a professional organization to have Salesforce, where really, if you had something like Teamgate, it's going to be much easier to use. Even HubSpot compared to Salesforce, much easier to use.
Tell me about Xenon's strategy, because you were placed as CEO at various companies, which is pretty cool, by the way. It's pretty interesting to get like that much experience in various companies. So they seem to pick the, you know, disciplined and reliable and focused type of CEO like you. And they just place these CEOs at companies. They pay them, I don't know, like multiple six-figure salary, give them a share of the company. Is that how it works?
So the Xenon model as a fund is all based around, we only buy B2B SaaS companies, and we've got to have, you know, COGS at 80%, or really COGS at 20%, 80% profitable in COGS. And then we've got to have a flat or slightly increasing growth for the company. And it's got to be, you know, recurring revenue structure. So professional services and stuff like that are out. And so for us, we like to buy these companies that were on the VC path, have really good technology, but for whatever reason, marketing, sales, something like that has fallen off the VC path. And so for us, that's our real sweet spot where we look at acquiring companies. When we look at structure, it's, you know, we like to have a collaborative and friendly environment within Xenon between the companies. And so we do weekly catch-ups with the leadership team within Xenon, and we discuss what's working, what's not, shared experiences, talk about what's working in marketing, what channels are being effective, and any tests that people are running and the experiences they have with that. So that allows us to, you know, to bring those learnings across the organization.
Love the model. I'll study Xenon a bit more and potentially invite some of your peers on the pod. I want to get your opinion with nowadays the events that are happening this world, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Hamas as an army guy. Like, how should we resolve these conflicts?
I think if there was an easy answer to that, it probably would have already been done. I think the biggest part, well, you know, it's sad to see any sort of conflict anywhere in the world. Speaking from, you know, experience, seeing what it does to the localized area that it's in, and globally what it does to everyone is really just such a shame. And for me, I think the biggest thing is how you resolve it. That's, you know, that's a question for the ages. And I think since the beginning of time, there has been war, and I don't think it's going to stop all of a sudden and achieve this, you know, world peace that people talk about. It's obviously bringing as much peace as possible is what we want, but at the end of the day, there's going to be people with other intentions and other goals in mind. And unfortunately, Europe is probably the biggest use case to see how war is just prolific throughout humankind, and it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. The best we can do is trying to reduce the effects of that.
Love the realism behind that answer. Where can people find out more about you, Abe?
Yeah, so people can, you know, find me on LinkedIn, Abe Dearmer, pretty simple. And if they want to know more about Appsembler, they can go to appsembler.com. And I'm active on LinkedIn, so feel free to send me a message or leave me a comment on any of the posts, and happy to have a discussion with anyone.